we've got some great feedback from last week's episode regarding business process automation. And I'm so excited because I think there's a lot of people that really are affected by feeling overwhelmed, overworked, multitasking, all these different things. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it because we don't want to admit that we're exhausted from all this multitasking and everything that's going on. We just have so much on our plate. And rather than talk about it with fellow entrepreneurs, we hide behind it because nobody wants to be known as the person who's overwhelmed by their business. But the honest truth is, the feedback that I received from this last week is that a lot of people are. A lot of people are frequently being distracted. They're multitasking. They're procrastinating. They feel like they're really busy, but not that effective. And some people don't even have enough energy to try to want to find a way around it. I think one of the most important things when you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of stuff on your plate, and this is going to feel very weird because you're going to say to me, but Jill, I don't even have enough time to get the stuff done that I need to get done. There is no way I can take a break. But here's why the break is important. By taking that break, you're allowing your brain the space to just decompress for a minute. Now, I'm not saying you have to take a whole day off, a whole week off, but give yourself a short amount of time to kind of regroup and get yourself out of distraction. Now, this could be something as even standing up away from your desk, going outside, and looking up at the sky. Now, this is something that I have used so many times because sometimes there's just so many things going on, you just have to walk away. Because if you don't, you know you're not going to be effective, you know you're not going to get anything done, and you're just going to feel more and more frustrated until you slowly start to boil up, and then it boils over. Usually on your spouse, a family member, the people that are closest to us. So we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the space to calm down before that happens. Now, when you come back from that break, taking a couple deep breaths, you've stared up at the sky, you've relaxed for a minute, I think the best thing to do when you come back from that situation is to do a brain dump. Because you know what? The things that you're looking at right now are probably stressing you out, but there's probably a lot of underlying things that are causing that overwhelm, and you've got to get it all out of your head. So you want to get a piece of paper, just free write. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be categorized. Just start writing. Now, when you think that you're done writing, keep going, because there's probably stuff in your subconscious that is distracting you or making you feel overwhelmed that maybe isn't at the surface and you don't even realize is causing you to stress out. When you look at your list and you see that there might be some things that have some things in common, maybe it's email, maybe it's phone calls, maybe it's finding the time to return all those phone calls and emails to people that are waiting for you. A lot of the stress I think that people feel is someone is waiting for something from me and I've got to get back to them, because we live in this culture of I need it yesterday. And when we fall behind on those emails or phone calls, that stress can bubble up because we don't want to disappoint people. But the reality of it is we got to come up with a system so that way we can stop that from happening, so that way the overwhelm doesn't pop back up. So if you listened to the episode from last week, you know, one of my things that I talked about was automating some of your emails, using templates, using anything that you could to help kind of minimize the amount of responses that you have to come up with for each email. Making that automated process is going to help so much. And I know what you're probably thinking, Jill, I am so stressed out and overwhelmed. I don't even have time to figure out what emails need which responses. And I think this brings up a really important point that you've got to take the time to do it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to carve out an entire day or 12 hours or something like that, but just start with one, because we lose track of these little tiny steps that can really move us forward, and instead we focus on big chunks of time. These big chunks that don't exist, instead of looking for the little 5, 10, 15-minute chunks that as we're, dropping kids off at practice, as we're, going from one appointment to the other, whatever the case may be, there's all these small pockets of time that we're missing out on that you could really be taking advantage of and finding out what are some things that I'm doing every single day that, one, I don't want to do, drive me nuts, or that I always feel keep popping up. Now, if you have a bit of an undiagnosed ADD brain like mine, you know that multitasking and getting distracted very easily happens pretty frequently. Now, one thing that's worked for me, and this is something that I've done for a while, so I've trained myself to do this, but just know nobody's perfect at it. Not me, not anybody. So it's just something that you've got to give yourself grace on and know that you're working on every single day. Every day, I have my planner open. It has a fresh sheet of paper every single day. And I just start making notes as they come up. Now, that might be notes from working with a client, or it might be something where I'm like, okay, gotta remember to do that. Or it could be something where there's a fire, but I'm currently working on something else. If the fire can wait, I'll write it in my notebook and come back to it. Or vice versa. If this fire needs my attention right now, I'm very diligent about writing where I'm leaving off. So that way when I go take care of that fire, I can immediately go back to where I was in that task that I was working on prior to that fire. Because what can happen a lot is that we get started, we're working, and then a fire pops up. And then we get distracted by that fire, we go handle that fire, and we come back and we're like, I don't even know where I left off. What part was I working on? And then it takes us, a half an hour to get back to where we were before. And by that time, another fire has popped up. And so it's this constant ping pong action that you're dealing with every day. And at the end of the day, you're like, I didn't get nothing done. What happened here? So making sure that you have a plan of what you're going to do when you get distracted, because you probably will, and making sure that you're doing that consistently every single day. Now, you got to remember, you got to give yourself grace on this, because if you're just starting this process, there's no way that you're going to be able to do it perfectly every single time. So you've got to cut yourself a break. So make sure that you're doing that. Make sure that these little pockets of time that you have access to, you are maximizing. Because once you start to recognize those small pockets of time, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I've got 5 minutes. What can I do in that 5 minutes? And you'll be shocked how much you can actually accomplish. Now, one thing too that I really find value in, especially when I'm working on a big project, is the Pomodoro method. So basically it's working on something for 20 minutes and then taking a 10-minute break. Now, there's all sorts of different variations of this system, different names, but essentially it's working on one project for a set length of time, taking a break completely away from that project, a real break. Not a fake one where you're like, oh, I'm going to work on some emails or something like that, but a true break, and then you can jump back into where you left off on this project. Now, there's apps, you can set your phone timer. There's so many different ways, and I encourage you to look into those systems if you think that's something that could help you. For me, one of my very first podcasts that you probably ever listened to was where I talked about my timer cube, where it has a 5 on one side, a 10 on the other, different time blocks. And so what I'll do is I will flip that time cube over, set it for just a couple minutes, give myself a chance to regroup and rethink through some things that will set me up for my next time block that I'm going to be using. I continue to encourage you to look for these small things that you can do to automate your process. Give yourself some time to let your brain cool down so the steam's not coming out your ears, and focus on business process automation. Business process automation can really change your business if you let it. You've got to work through these processes, because if you don't, you're going to be exactly where you are now, and you know where you are now is not working. So you've got to do something different in order to move you past it.